The Iran-Iraq War did not erupt overnight. Its roots stretched deep into centuries of history, contested borders, and long-held fears. In the heart of the Middle East, two nations braced against the tides of destiny. Iran and Iraq rose from ancient civilizations, each shaped by kings, empires, and traditions. Side by side, they built identities that would one day collide in a modern conflict. Modern borders, drawn hastily by colonial powers in the 20th century, left disputes unresolved. Lines on a map would later become lines of fire, defining a war before it began. At the heart of tension flowed the Shatt al-Arab River, a lifeline for trade, oil, and survival. Control of these waters became a symbol of power and sovereignty. Both nations claimed the river and the lands surrounding it. Geography became more than terrain, it became the spark for confrontation. Ethnic and cultural differences heightened the rivalry. Arab Iraq and Persian Iran, each proud of its heritage, struggled to coexist under the shadow of suspicion and mistrust. Religion added another layer of tension. Shia and Sunni communities, intertwined with politics, fueled fears that would soon erupt into open conflict. Oil wealth turned stakes into matters of life and death. Borders were not just lines, they represented power, survival, and the promise of regional influence. Saddam Hussein, ambitious and ruthless, sought dominance in the Gulf. Iran was not merely a neighbor to him, it was an obstacle to his vision of supremacy. Before 1979, Iran stood as a modern U.S. ally and regional powerhouse. Its cities, oil wealth, and military strength gave it influence until revolution reshaped the nation. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 shook the region. Crowds tore down symbols of the Shah, shouting for a new order, a radical transformation that unsettled neighbors and allies alike. Iran watched nervously. The Shia majority in southern Iraq seemed inspired by Iran's upheaval, creating fear that revolutionary ideas might cross the border. Iran openly called for Islamic Revolution beyond its borders. Speeches, posters, and propaganda spread fervent ideology across the region, challenging existing regimes. Arab nations quietly supported Iraq as a buffer against Iran's ambitions. Diplomacy was tense, and silent agreements were already forming behind closed doors. By 1980, the stage was set. Both nations stood armed, wary, and ready. The first sparks of war were about to ignite, and the world would watch closely. Saddam Hussein believed the moment favored Iraq. With military precision and ambition, he calculated the risks and prepared to strike first. Iran's army was weakened by purges after the revolution. Officers had been removed, morale shaken, leaving the country vulnerable to sudden attack. Saddam rejected the Algiers Agreement, erasing treaties on paper and preparing to redraw history with tanks and artillery. War planning maps highlighted targets and troop movements. Iraq calculated a swift victory, confident in its strategy and military might. On September 22, 1980, Iraq invaded Iran. Tanks rolled across borders at dawn, and the first airstrikes rained down. The war had begun. Khuzestan's oil fields became immediate targets. Iraq sought territory, prestige, and the wealth to fuel its ambitions. Iran responded with determination. Volunteers, soldiers, and civilians took up arms. Defending the homeland became a sacred duty. The conflict spread quickly. Cities burned, towns were shelled, and the war expanded along the border in a deadly dance. Trenches and mud became the new reality. Stalemates replaced fast victories, and soldiers endured months of grueling front lines. Chemical weapons crossed a horrifying threshold. Gas masks and alarms became daily life. marking a war that knew no moral boundaries. Oil tankers burned at sea, turning the Gulf into a floating battlefield. The global economy watched as resources became weapons. The U.S. and Soviet Union supplied weapons, fueling a war that had become a proxy for global power struggles. Hospitals overflowed, and refugees fled in thousands. Millions of lives were uprooted, the human cost escalating every day. Martyr posters adorned streets. Funerals became symbols of sacrifice, patriotism, and propaganda. After years of brutal fighting, the front lines froze. Exhausted armies and shattered landscapes marked a stalemate that neither side could overcome. National pride rallies surged even as cities burned. Citizens were torn between loyalty, fear, and despair. Economic collapse gripped both nations. Oil revenues dwindled, industries faltered, and citizens faced shortages and uncertainty. Bombed-out cities became symbols of war's toll. Civilians faced ruins, debris, and the shadow of destruction every day. In UN chambers, global leaders debated but often failed to act. Diplomacy lagged, while destruction continued unabated. Pride, fear, and silence prolonged the war. Both nations were trapped in a cycle of retaliation and stubbornness. In 1988, UN Resolution 598 demanded a ceasefire. After 8 long years, the world finally intervened to stop the bloodshed. Iran accepted the ceasefire, famously calling it drinking poison. The bitter end was a necessity, not a victory. Guns fell silent. The echoes of artillery were replaced by grief, mourning, and the slow process of recovery. Ruined cities, cemeteries, and memorials bore witness to the cost. No nation truly won. The losses were immeasurable. Borders remained unchanged, but the scars of war marked the landscape and the psyche of both nations. Veterans returned home with invisible wounds, carrying memories of battles that would haunt them for decades. Memorials and monuments arose to honor sacrifice, while families grappled with the missing, the fallen, and the memories. National identities were reshaped by conflict. Both Iran and Iraq learned that war leaves no winner, only lessons. Political aftermath lingered, governments adjusted, societies healed slowly, and regional tensions simmered beneath the surface. The war's causes were complex. Fear, ambition, and mistrust intertwined with history, borders, and ideology. Front lines stretched endlessly, a visual reminder that pride and stubbornness can sustain conflict for years. The echoes of the war remain in modern Middle East tensions, shaping politics and alliances even today. Ruins of battlefields faded into the present, but the lessons of history endure for those who pay attention. Books, photographs, and memories preserve the stories of war. Each date, each battle, each decision carries weight. Calendars and timelines show the relentless passage of time, but scars remain as reminders of human suffering. Aerial shots of cities today reveal reconstruction, but underneath, the memories of conflict linger. Reflections on war illustrate the cost of pride, ambition, and unresolved tensions. Educators and historians teach these lessons, warning that history can repeat if ignored. Globes, maps, and archives preserve the story of a war that reshaped the region forever. Memory is a tool for understanding. Nations and individuals must confront the past to shape a better future. Subscribe for Date-Wise History, because every war has a beginning, every conflict has lessons, and every story deserves to be remembered.